Hello, I'm Shamaree Brown, Director of Student Athlete Programs and Compliance at the Atlantic Coast Conference. I'm happy to have joining us today Keri Becker, who's Director of Athletics at Grand Valley State University, and Anthony Azama, who's Director of Athletics at Washington University in St. Louis. Today's topic is setting a new direction while maintaining success. So Keri, both you and Anthony inherited programs that were highly successful, that are still highly successful. To start off, can you speak a little bit about how you prepared yourselves to take over a successful program as athletic director?
All right. I think at some point in your career, you make a decision if this is going to be the end game. I coached for 15 years. I knew I wasn't going to be that gray-haired little old lady running around in a softball field, so I had to figure out what was next. So I started to look around and do one very intentional thing. How do I expand my breadth and depth of experience beyond being a softball coach? Once I started to do that and get some experiences in the athletic department at Ferris State University, another Division II institution, then I had to seek out external influence. So I think a pivotal moment was attending what used to be called NACWA-HERS. It's now Women Leader in Sports, but NACWA-HERS was the first level of some training that they put on to help you to get some experience, get some knowledge, hear from the best in the industry in terms of being an administrator, transitioning from coach to administrator. And I think the third way is you have to take advantage. So the typical seminars and workshops, you actually have to put some time into your own professional development. And then the third way I think is books, and more books. I read and kept reading about leadership. I think my first one was the typical Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and then it went from good to great. How the Mighty Fall to my latest one was Extreme Ownership by 2 Navy SEALs. And so I think you always continue to do that because those things cost $0 or very few dollars to do. And so I think that's, and I always say, I think finally is the thing that prepared me most to be in this seat is I've walked in the shoes of the people I'm serving, being a student athlete first and then being a coach for so many years and then now as an administrator.
That's good. Anthony, how about yourself?
Yeah, I would echo some of the stuff that was said, but I think some of the things that was important to me is, number one, I had to find my why. Why is this important? What is feeding my passion, my purpose to really determine, is this the right thing for me? Because I wanted to bring the right energy and intensity and intentionality to the opportunity as it presented itself. I think the other thing is making sure you have a moral compass. Because this business will pull you in a lot of different directions, and I don't think you move up the ladder any faster by cutting corners. And investing that time in yourself and really taking the time to really develop and learn the craft. Whether you're going to be internal or whether you're going to be external, be the best at it. And I would say lastly, take on those projects other people don't want to do. And because there will be an impact with it, not only in the organization, but to you. And how you'll learn your process and how you work with others, how you engage people, and how you try to get people to galvanize around a concept, an idea, a vision, if you will.
We talked outside about being the doer, being the one to step up, so absolutely, love that.
All right, so in talking about these successful programs and inheriting these successful programs, did you all feel any additional pressures stepping into the chair to continue it, to do what your predecessor or be like your predecessor, or how comfortable were you being your own person, your own man, your own woman, and having your own leadership style?
Yeah, I think authenticity is important. I think when you define the why to people, it allows you to kind of be open, and I don't look at it being vulnerable as much as it allows people to get to know you and understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. I always tell people tradition is what keeps us awake at night. And trying to live up to the expectations of making sure we provide student athletes the best experience that they can have. And every day it needs to be about how do we enhance that experience and making sure we don't have any blind spots. And we meet young people where they're at, regardless of where they come from, what part of the country, socioeconomic, that whole sort of thing, because what we're providing them when it comes to athletics is something that they can't necessarily experience in the curriculum that they will learn. They can't learn that in 4 walls of a classroom. The leadership skills, interpersonal skills, organizational skills, the failure resiliency. You don't learn that in a 4-person project as much as you can fail and succeed all in one inning, right? And how you respond to that. I think that thing makes what we do pretty dynamic. And I think at the end of the day, when you're around leaders and people who want to win, they're always trying to strive to get better, regardless of who's in the chair.
You talk about pressures. And we feed off that. This is athletics. I mean, you're used to it. I mean, we knew there was pressures, but I think that's what helps motivate you, because if I had to describe myself in one word, I'd say competitive. Yeah. And I think that's how I've lived my whole life. I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. So, my mom went to a rummage sale and bought us toys. She came back with 2 sets of boxing gloves when I was 10 years old. It seemed like a great idea, but now as I reflect back, she came home with boxing gloves for me and a twin brother. So resiliency, you learn those types of things, and I think it's the competitive thing. So the pressure of taking over, that wasn't really an issue, but what everybody's asking is they want to know your vision. They want to know what you're going to do different. Right. But the question is, how are you not going to screw this up, Becker? Right? So there's a little pressure that creates there, and I think, but you have to, I like what you said, get back to your why. And I think for me, I'd spent so much time preparing for it, and I'm going to go and I'm a doer, so I'm going to do some things, and I know I have some lessons to share. If anybody wants to call me, I'll tell you a few things what not to do. But I think you just do, and you just depend on your authentic self. You depend on your preparation, because you spend your whole life preparing, and that's all I had, because I had never been in the seat. And so in the interview process, I had to prove to them I could be a master of something I've never done. Mm-hmm. And all you have to fall back on is your preparation, your why, who you are at your core, and trust that. That's your compass.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about setting a vision and people want to know if you're going to screw it up or not, right? So talk a little bit about the strategies you use of sharing that vision once you became an athletic director, sharing that vision, and if there were any changes that you wanted to make, becoming an athletic director, really being promoted as athletic director as an internal candidate. What strategies did you use to share that vision and to make some changes that you probably wanted to make?
Well, I think the strategy was not to do too much, right? And people want you to roll out some things. We are just now, I'm in 2.5 years, we are just now starting to think strategically about how we're going to look differently. We're going down the process of having a strategic plan, right? A roadmap, or what we're going to call a game plan, because strategic planning scares people, right? But we're going to call it a game plan, and we're having those critical conversations about how we're going to change. But the strategy when I first came in is, I wanted to honor and embrace the traditions of the past, right? And Tim Selgo had set the 3 fundamentals of success. Those were absolute. They're on our walls. Those are absolute. They've worked. I wanted to honor and embrace those. And they still hold true today. The wording might change a little bit, but those still hold true today. But the strategy for me, and in no uncertain terms, I wanted people to understand that my vision was to create the best possible student-athlete experience from a holistic standpoint, right? Academically, athletically, and socially. I wanted to give our coaches the best chance to give our student athletes the best chance for success. And so I think as administrators, coaches go in living rooms and they talk about the experience they're going to have. Well, coaches, we want them to coach. We want them to develop talent and leadership through the context of their sport. Administrators and all the rest of the support staff have to deliver on the rest of the experience. And so that's what my strategy was, to do that. I did make some changes, and implemented some things that I wish I would have paused a little bit on. Whole nother segment, but nothing disastrous happening. But right now we're starting to, let's pause a little bit, pump the brakes, revisit some things, and move forward. So that, to me, the strategy is just now starting to happen.
All right.
I'm not an internal candidate. So.
right. But coming outside in from another institution, everyone's looking at you. All right, what is he going to do? What changes is he going to make? Right. What strategies did you use? When people were probably a little uncomfortable, waiting to see, what you were going to do. 3 things. One,
I think you have to understand the local context and understand the environment. And there's ways to do that. And people talk about look, listen, learn, and pick and choose your times when to lead and all that good stuff. I also think there's a term called strategic speed. You need to, trust the process. Because there's a lot of different ways to do it. You just come in, move dirt, try to build things. You can come in and not do the things that are so flashy that helps build a foundation, build policy, build process, and make the enterprise more efficient. But for me, the vision included the voices of the staff and the coaches. And it's what I heard, what I saw, what I experienced. And when you take a part of that with your experience that you're bringing in, because I do have a unique experience from the SEC, mid-major, Ivy League, it allowed a perspective to where I was embracing Division III, but I also knew the difference between it is what it is, but what do we want it to become at the end of the day? And you'll hear these reoccurring things, whether it's student athletes, alumni, current coaches, former coaches, to where they'll tell you some things that are great, but man, here's some low-lying fruit. Here's some things that I just wish that we would have addressed. Well, you got to include that in the plan that you're trying to put together. I don't think a listening tour lasts a year. I think a listening tour lasts a lifetime. As you continue to develop and really sharpen the direction and the vision that you're trying to go. And all we try to do is just highlight those things that we were doing great, or they were doing great before I got there, and really put a spin on it so they can take it into a household, so we can use it to go get resources. Because at the end of the day, it was about recruiting, whether it's student athletes, whether it's fans, resources, because you can never have enough. And we got to have a clear mission and vision so people know what we will do with those resources, because it's about impacting student athletes, as she mentioned. And then relevancy. I'm at an institution that's a top 20 institution. So when I talk about our student athletes, 3.5 GPA, 96% job placement rate, I want to speak the same language that the deans are speaking, that we're making an impact too. This is not glorified PE. You know, we are going out, trying to compete at a high level to win championships, compete for championships, but there's a curriculum that's happening here. And look at the outcomes. Our kids are getting jobs and getting in grad school at a higher rate of the student body, as well as graduation rate is high. So when you're able to have that complete, clear, succinct message, it makes it hard for people to debate whether or not they should get on board. They really start to reveal themselves, that they may not be here for the student athlete.
There's a lot
that's the tough part of the job, right?
There's a lot of good nuggets in there.
Yeah, a lot of good nuggets.
But one of the one I wanted to highlight is in the interview process, they ask you every time, what's your vision? Well, that's not a fair question.
Right.
You create that vision collectively, and it takes, whether you're an internal candidate or coming from the outside, you still got to listen, because they got to get to know you in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Right. One of the good things that I'm hearing from both of you all, we're talking about success, right? And the first thing one will think about is on the field, on the court, achievement. But for both of you all, the successes that you're talking about is not only athletically related, but it's about the development of the student, right? So in my space and around student athlete development, it's about growing leaders, right? Growing your student athletes into being leaders, whether it's academically or in life. So that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your leadership styles, right? And, you know, Keri, 3 years as athletic director, Anthony, 18 months as athletic director. How has your leadership style evolved or shifted a little bit since taking over?
I always thought of myself as being very decisive, can make quick decisions. Certainly athletics teaches that. But if there's one thing that I think has evolved is patience. Right? And I mentioned, I wish I would have paused on a few things, but patience and allow some people to get used to to actually go through a transition, right? So I think my leadership style has evolved from one being a doer to a leader, and those are very different. I always placed a lot of stock in leading by example, and that's being the doer in me. Now to truly be a leader and come up out of the weeds and fly, and that concept with my military background of decentralized command. Allowing your leaders to lead their areas and trust, right? But also be patient, because it takes time to see some things, because you want outcome. We want results in athletics, right? It's going to take time. And then we had some other dynamics with some new staff, some brand new staff that didn't have the foundation of our culture coming in. I needed to let them get up to speed, and and my expectations were unrealistic, right? And so I think as my leadership has evolved, it's in patience and the concept of time.
I agree with those two things she just said. I mean, those spot on. I think for me, it was really about being in the moment. I think there's times when you're an athletic director, you get pulled in a lot of different directions, and you're trying to learn how to live with regret. I didn't spend as much time with this person as I should have because I had to go out and fundraise. I'm spending a lot of time with the coaches, but I need to go get them resources, so I need to be out and fundraise. And it keeps you it will put you in a situation where you're continuously being distracted versus being in the moment. And I think going to games, being at those early morning practices is a great reminder of sometimes we're doing enough. And sometimes we got to find that balance, because if we're not at our best, then we're going to fail these young people. We're going to fail these coaches. And being able to kind of swallow the pride a little bit and put the ego in check and really think about, at the end of the day, I'm one person. And if I can figure out best ways to manage my time so I can really do my fair share of making an impact, I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned in the 18 months. Because when you start off, you're trying to do a lot of things for a lot of people because you're the new person in the seat. And at the end of the day, I think if people know where your heart is, this gets back to people really understanding your why. I don't think people would walk away from a conversation that could really be 30 minutes, even though it got cut off at 15, because you're always trying to share a piece of yourself with people. The thing they never talk about is you can go through a day meeting 30 some odd people, engaging with 30 some odd people, but whether it's 29 or whether it's the first, they have to feel like they're the only person that you've talked to. And I think sometimes those 30 people forget that you're one person, but the responsibility of the job is the one in which you got to make each one of those people feel special. Being in the moment allows you to be okay taking a step back away from the moment so you can do two things. One, be reflective and find resolution. What could I have done better? And not beat yourself up. What are the things that I did really well? You know, sometimes we always try to critique versus reward. And I think that's important, because at the end of the day, I think the people who work with us and the students we work for, they want our best self. And I'm learning that when I'm in the moment, I can be my best self.
So talking about that evaluation and critiquing oneself, what metrics are you all using to make sure that you're going in the right direction, or at least the direction that you want to go?
The KPIs, the key performance indicators. Well, for me, it's both quantitative and qualitative, but I think it's really about making sure that your staff and your coaches are really looking at the experience and looking at it through a clear set of eyes, because you will be surprised that one team, several individuals could have a different experience because we're not knowledgeable about, a Pell Grant eligible student, and we're assuming that, well, everybody's coming here at a certain level. And we got to make sure the infrastructure, as we continue to kind of recruit and cast a wider net in the type of kids that we're trying to provide an opportunity to make sure we are creating an environment that is setting every student athlete, regardless of gender, regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of race, ethnicity, to give them the best opportunity to be successful at the end of the day. So there's some things I look at: graduation rate, job placement rate, grad school, success of the team, but there's some quality experience things that we always try to evaluate. And we bleed that through coaches' evaluations, we bleed it through end of the year surveys with teams, and we bleed it through, our values and mission statement, like she discussed. How are we making sure we're living that? What are those key performance indicators that will show that we're trending in the right direction? Because you'll never actually get there, but you got to make sure you're not failing anybody at the end of the day. So I could give you some things, but that could be this week, and then next semester it might change because we brought in a totally different class of individuals. And this Generation Z is a little bit different than Generation X. And my hope is, as we continue to evolve as leaders, that we're trying to meet young people wherever they're at to get them to where they need to be in order to be successful. So I look at these 4 years as a opportunity, a learning lab, to be more prepared for the next 40 years of success.
That's good.
And you get that when they call you up 10 years from now and say, thank you. That's a metric, right?
That's a huge metric.
Right?
That's one they never evaluate. Like, why don't you survey when they graduate, when they already out?
But and there's a couple things I think. We get instant feedback in athletics every day, right? In practice, and certainly in games. We got the win-loss column, right? The success of the team. We got graduation rates, attrition rates. I look at rosters. Are kids coming? Are we retaining those kids? And ultimately, are they graduating? Right. But I think you got leading and lagging indicators, right? Yeah. Did they graduate? Well, if you get a number, well, it's too late. So you look at attrition rates. That's the leading indicator that says, okay, we're seeing some attrition between freshman and sophomore. What's going on? Right. So that causes us to have a conversation with our coaches to say, what's going on? Now, we're dealing with 18 to 23-year-olds, and so and especially this new generation, whole nother segment that I love. I have a lot of faith in this generation. But I think you can't just place it all on the outcomes, right? Yeah. And so I think you have to go back to, it's not really metrics, because it's not objective things, but it's culture and that concept of decentralized command in terms of leadership. Your coaches leading their teams. Are those happening with the right foundation and doing it the right way in the culture? What culture are they creating in their programs? Are they giving their student athletes the best chance for success? And if the answer is yes, you'll see the outcomes. You'll see the outcomes in terms of graduation rates, attrition rates, and wins and losses on the field, right? And then also the social part, right? Yeah. They're good citizens they're good citizens of the campus. They're part of the student body, not this silo over here. Are they engaging the campus resources? You can look at those things. Yeah. What kind of community service? On my board of trustees report, I don't talk to about wins and losses. I give them the numbers behind athletics, the number of community service hours, recruiting and retention rates. Athletics is one of the most diverse groups on our campus. We talk about who they are behind the wins and losses. So those are still numbers and some metrics, but I think it goes back to, and then of course the decentralized command, I talked about coaches, but also administrators. Yep. It's my external. Are they doing the things, and have they developed that culture within that they lead and go? You let them fly, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit numbers and objective, but it's really subjective, and it comes back to the softer things, I suppose.
Yeah. Culture is important, and it's something that you work on every day. I mean, in every interaction, every decision that's being made, how you greet visitors. I mean, it's something that you live. And trying to make sure you maintain that culture and continue to try to develop it. I think that's the challenge that we all try to. You
take it for granted. One of the things that happened to me is on the external side, we had 4 new employees. And the deputy AD, I moved him up. I promoted him to the deputy AD. He's a phenomenal resource. He's an idea guy. He's a mover and a shaker. He's exciting. But we had 4 new employees. We needed to take the time. I needed to take the time to help them understand the foundation and the culture.
Onboarding is so critical.
Right. And so now, as I sit a year later and talk to them, we're pumping the brakes. Yeah. And it's like learning. What do they call that? Like drinking through a fire hose, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what they did, and they did great, and they survived. But we could have helped them be better, right?
So, final question, Anthony. What does success look like for WashU athletics?
What does success look like for us? Success looks like we have young people that have a degree that's going to a world-class degree that's going to open up doors in one hand. They got championship jewelry in the other. And they are about to start their first job or start grad school. That's what success looks like.
Keri, same question. What does success look like for Grand Valley State athletics?
Number 1, they graduate, they get jobs, they have careers, they call us and say thank you later. Yeah. We tell our student athletes, I tell them at the end of the year, it's a senior salute, we don't say goodbye, we say see you later. Yeah. And when we do see them later, that tells us only then that we had success, right? Yeah. And all the rest of it, winning it will come if you focus on that, that final outcome.
Yeah. Keri, Anthony, thank you so much. Great nuggets. Once again, I'm Shamaree Brown. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Athletic Director U.